welcome to the Toes on the Line podcast. I'm your host, Gio Grassi, and today I got my man Pratik Patel, who is the Director of Performance Nutrition and Assistant Strength and Conditioning Coach with the New York Giants. And Pratik has been around the game for a while at the highest Division I level in college and also the New York Giants at the pro level. Pratik, what's up, baby?
What's good, Gio? Thanks for having me on, man.
I appreciate you for coming on and taking your personal time off to really come on and talk about the state of sports nutrition is what we're going to call this one, man. But if you could just take some time, intro yourself, talk about your career journey and kind of how you got to this role with the New York Giants, which I believe was a brand new role when you got there.
Yes, it was. So I was hired back in 2017. So fortunate enough to be able to go into my fourth year with the team. A lot of transitions happened since then. One of the longest tenured on the staff currently. Been through a few different head coaches. But when I was hired by Aaron Wellman in a dual role capacity. So not only am I the team dietitian, but I'm also assistant strength and conditioning coach. And over the past couple of years, kind of added some more duties to my role. So now, aside from the dual role, I'm also in charge of our blood biomarker program. Also a big hand in sleep and recovery education with the team. Prior to this, I was at the University of Oregon for 3 years as the director of sports nutrition. So really had the opportunity to learn a lot from the performance staff there, the medical staff there, and a really holistic environment that had started to thrive once Chip Kelly took over. So a lot of investment in sports science, sports performance, athlete monitoring. It was a really good opportunity for me to learn about that there because I hadn't been exposed to it. Worked with a lot of really great people on the medical side and also on the sports performance side with a couple of people, including Hugh Fulliger, James Hanish, and Andrew Murray. But prior to that, I was at Michigan State University as a sports dietitian, working really closely with the strength and conditioning staff. So that was a great opportunity because I worked very closely with Coach Manny and his staff. I got to see things from their perspective. Wasn't really doing any coaching with the Michigan State athletes at the time. I was had my hand in a few other things related to on campus and also off campus. On campus, I was also assisting with some research projects and doing some teaching off campus, working with Joe Eisenman and just doing some holistic training with the mid-Michigan youth athlete population that was there. And prior to Michigan State, I was at Kansas State. I was there for undergrad, and then I was there for grad school as a graduate teacher, and then reached out and started working with the men's basketball team as a sports dietitian and was doing some group fitness coaching, teaching weightlifting movements, kind of going through the gamut of everything from like Wendler's 531 to some West Side stuff to a lot of different methodologies. So I've been very fortunate to have a lot of different experiences, have seen a lot of different things, and it's kind of all culminated to what I'm currently doing right now with the Giants.
So let me ask you this question. I don't think I ever asked you this personally. How difficult is it for you to play dual role in a organization where, the attention to detail has to be at an all-time high? Like, how do you channel your focus in being a nutrition coach and also assistant strength coach?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I know my main role is as the team dietitian. So all of that's going to supersede anything else that comes after it. And, when Aaron was with us, he knew that too. So if there was something that was really pressing or I needed to get done or I needed to follow up with an athlete and we didn't necessarily have a scheduled lift going on, then I would be able to follow through with that. I think the toughest thing about that is trying to manage the expectations of what I wanted to get done with just having myself as the only one that was involved in this nutrition side outside of all of our really awesome food service staff members. But then again, they're so busy, cranking out 2 to 3 meals a day for not only the athletes and coaches, but for the entire staff that's working in the building. And it's one of the benefits of being around the Giants organization because it is a family-run organization and they treat everybody really well. So I think the hardest part was just managing my expectations of what I wanted to get done and knowing that, all right, well, it's just me. I can't, it's hard enough to just be in 2 places at once as a dietitian. It's even harder when you're wearing that cap of, all right, now I'm also an assistant strength and conditioning coach. I'm assigned with this group and this lift. I've got to coach them up. And then we're going on the field. And then I've got to make sure that everything happens post-training with all the recovery and follow-ups and talking with the medical staff. And then, hey, we got another group coming in. I got to take care of them. So then I won't be able to get my additional time with that group that just finished. So time management, understanding the schedule, knowing where my attention needed to be focused with, whether it was a specific athlete that flagged on our list for a variety of reasons, or somebody I needed to follow up with. I think that was the most difficult part. I think there was also a lot of benefits of being able to have a hand at both roles, that I was able to see a lot of things that I wouldn't necessarily have in some of my former roles as only the dietitian of an athletic department or a football team. So I think that there's, it's good and bad with both ways you look at it.
Yeah. Now you have great success throughout your career. You have your own pillars of nutritional success. Let's spend time, introduce those pillars of success, and how did you cultivate that all into one?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's transitioned over the years. It's definitely a lot different from when I first got in the field. So when I first got in the field, it was more, eating the right foods and fluids at the right time, for peak athletic performance. And I think that's a very generic way of looking at things. I know a lot of people have mentioned it and they've kind of used the same verbiage. And it's changed based on each place that I've been, the access to resources, how much we end up understanding about our athletes. The more I've learned about, physiology, athlete behavior, interpersonal neurobiology, social psychology, and not just, this is what they need to eat and drink, because there's so much more that goes behind it. So now it's very much where I really won't start giving athletes advice until I get enough background information from them, whether it's through a standardized nutritional assessment or, I ask them a series of questions, in the event that I'm talking to them face to face and we only have 5 minutes or 2 minutes or less. I need as much background information as I can, because now we're able to gather as much data on our players, whether it's, biomarker data, whether it's lifestyle data, whether it's physical data, whether it's health data, all of that, because I can't start putting together information or plans for players until I know exactly what's going on. I wasn't like that when I first got started and when I first became a dietitian, where I would just, ask 1 or 2 questions and then shoot, here, this is what you need to do. And then the athlete has difficulty following because it doesn't necessarily fall in line with what their schedule is like or what's going on in their life. So I think the way I kind of look at things now is doing a full-on assessment. I guess you can kind of call it an exponential view of things, where you look at the person as a whole, try to get down to the root of the problem. So, people always come up like, oh, I'm tired, I don't have energy. It's like, oh, you probably didn't eat, or you're not hydrated, or I pulled a muscle, oh, you're dehydrated. It's like, well, no, there's probably something deeper than that, and I've got to find the right questions to ask, and then I can build on top of that. So I don't really buy into any specific type of diet or methodology in that regard. I mean, some things can work for some people, but obviously it's not always a one-off for everybody. So I know that's a very vague general answer, but as time has passed, I start looking at things more like, I'll really start with sleep, mental health, mindfulness, breathing. How well are those guys doing on those things? Correlate it with any specific medical injury or medical history. And then from there, it's like, all right, well, I have your anthro assessments. We do BOD pod, but we also do some pretty rigorous kin anthropometry. And then we also know the positional demands. We'll talk to the coordinators and the position coaches based on the film that they've seen, say, hey, this guy might be moving positions, or I think this guy could excel doing this. So then it starts to allow us to build. And then we know what the training is like. We know what the training periodization. So then the nutrition periodization comes in. We have the blood biomarkers on them. So I know where they're deficient and I know what they need. We start asking more about doing sleep assessments so we can figure things out like that. And then it becomes a lot easier to start building once we get that information. Then we take into consideration their habits. What they like, what they don't like. Some guys have pretty serious allergies or aversions, or they're very picky about what they like and what they don't. So then that adds another layer to it.
That's good stuff. And it's great that you mentioned all that stuff, because, talking about, watching film and, asking coaches what they see out of certain players on film, and you being a dietitian and taking that information and utilizing it, that just shows how deep of a position a dietitian has on a football program versus, giving your basic information on carb, protein, and fat intake. You know what I'm saying? So that's awesome stuff, man. So with what you just said, Teak, what would you say the state of sports nutrition, or a sports dietitian, better off? What's the state of a sports dietitian's career? Where is it heading? Being that, we have all this information on the internet, I feel like anyone can find out, total calories in for whatever, X, Y, and Z, total protein intake for this type of athlete, carb intake. Like, where do you personally see the state of sports nutrition right now? Where do you see it heading into?
That's a good question. It's grown quite a bit in the 11 years that I've been in. So it's been moving in the right direction just in terms of integration with teams, the number of job opportunities that are out there. Now you have almost every single Power 5 school has, not only one, but maybe 2 or 3 dietitians, and rightfully so, because most Power 5 schools, the large schools, they've got anywhere from 18 to 30 to 40 different teams. And when you're talking about athletes that are college age, they really don't know what they're doing nutrition-wise, because no one's really ever taken the time to teach them this is what you need to do based on training, because you're an athlete and you're not a part of the general population. And the best and worst thing, and I've said this quite a bit, to happen to the field was that 2014 deregulation of feeding that went through the NCAA, where now they were allowed to provide almost anything you really wanted to at fueling stations. You could provide multiple meal opportunities around, the things that athletes are participating in. So that went from, just football and basketball getting training table and bagels and whatnot, to now every single athlete can get at least 1 to 2 meals, if not potentially 3. And then maybe most of their other calories can be taken care of at the fueling stations. So with all these NCAA Division I programs creating athlete-only dining facilities, or starting to implement more money and budgets to feeding the athletes, you obviously need somebody who's going to oversee that. And, who better than the sports dietitian who knows what the athletes should be eating. So they're the part of the menu creation, and it opens up the door to creating all these fueling stations and this, that, and the other, which is a great thing. But at the same time, it starts diluting what sports dietitians can actually bring to the table, especially those that have a background in exercise physiology or strength and conditioning, that can really speak the language of what the strength and conditioning coach knows and wants. Same thing from those on the medical side, and same thing from those that are on the performance side. If, that school actually has a sports science type monitoring performance staff. So with all the time spent, and it's a lot of time spent having to figure out, the logistics and the planning and the purchasing and procurement, the storage, the stocking, the making of shakes and smoothies and moving it around, and having to do it not only for football, but you've got 20 other teams that are spread out all throughout campus. You're not allowed to really flex your muscles with that exercise physiology and, creative problem solving type brain. You're spending all your time doing all this stuff to just get it done. So that's an issue, because you see these people that become directors of Power 5 schools, a lot of their time is having to figure all that out. Well, how are you going to staff these areas when you only have 1 or 2 other full-time people? And you're talking about staffing 6 to 7 different areas. Well, if you don't have the student manpower, the interns, or the staff, you've got to do it yourself. So then you're bringing on workers and students and hiring staff. So the only thing that they really associate sports nutrition with is this whole rat race of being in charge of the fueling stations and doing the ordering and the logistics and the catering and the menu planning, as opposed to, I'm out of practice, I'm problem solving this, and this. I'm talking to the medical staff every day. We're going through the injury report. All right, well, this needs to happen. This needs to happen. I'm talking to the strength and conditioning staff. This is what's going on in the weight room. Coach told the head strength coach that, hey, these 3 guys are, we're position changing them. They need to gain weight. So now the strength coach is like, all right, now we're tweaking their training program. So I need to get with the dietitian. This is the expectation. Now that person can go and, take the time to figure out what they need to do to meet the demands of what the head coach wants. So there's a lot less of that, and just a lot more of doing all the other day-to-day, basic labor type stuff. So unfortunately, you have a lot of practitioners that haven't been taught very well, or they're stuck in their current role, and they just don't have a lot of other skills, to take from that book range. They haven't been developing a lot of range because they majored in nutrition. They went and did their internship in nutrition. They did a sports nutrition internship, and now they have their first job or something similar. And all they've seen is the stocking and the smoothie making and X, Y, and Z, as opposed to a lot of the other things that can happen. So there's a misconception with what RDs can and actually should bring to the table. And there's also a misconception with when teams are hiring, what are they looking for? So some don't really even know what they're looking for, because if you're only experienced, whether you're a DC or you're a head strength coach and you went somewhere else and you want a dietitian, is what you've been exposed to. So if what you've been exposed to is just the whole, all of what I'd mentioned before, then you're setting the bar pretty low with what your expectations are and what you're going to get in a higher.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you that next, like, with strength and conditioning advancing, even from when I was in college, back in the early 2000s, it's like, man, like now they got tendos in almost every single weight room. They got iPads in almost every single weight room. The force plates at the bigger schools. So like S&C's using all these extra like technological platforms just to somehow test their athletes differently than what they did back in the days. And from what you're saying, it almost sounds like you're doing that with sports nutrition with blood biomarkers, and obviously not everyone can use a bod pod, but obviously you're using that, so that gives you an extra edge on identifying extra things. But like, how do you see sports nutrition turning that corner like strength and conditioning has, and meeting the strength coach, and the sport coach in that circle where the nutritionist is not teaching interns how to make a shake or stock a fucking fridge or fill up a fueling station, because I'll be honest, we don't have the luxury to, hire sports nutritionists. So we all got our precision nutrition. I'm an infant when it comes to sport nutrition. It's like, where do you see nutrition going in the direction with using this technology for testing athletes for something a little bit different?
Yeah, I think it's not just with testing athletes, it's understanding how do you get to the root of the problem, because a lot of the things you can do with nutrition, you don't really need a lot of technology to come with. And that goes back to that whole exponential line of thinking is these exponential companies use a massive transformative purpose, and they use the abundance of data that's out there. So all the data is out there just in terms of just asking people. Mm-hmm. So, you've heard the saying, I can't coach you if I don't know you. And it's the same thing. I can't create nutrition interventions for you until I actually know a lot more about you. Well, who has all that information? Well, you're talking to the athlete themselves. The strength coach has a lot of information. The medical staff has a lot of information. If you're looking at college, you have your recruiting department has a lot of information. The coaches have a lot of information. If it's, looking at the NFL, then you have your scouting and player personnel has a lot of information. So the more you understand and learn about somebody's situation, the easier it is to start developing a relationship with them, and then figuring out how you can present this information to them to figure out, all right, what's best for them. If we look at this next training block, what is the objective? What does the schedule look like? What information do we already have? And then work backwards. Then you can start putting together your periodized plan, mm-hmm. as opposed to doing everything on the fly and last minute. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of assertiveness or initiative to go out and get that information. So this is kind of the model that I've been thinking about really for like the past 4 or 5 years is, creating this practitioner framework of, developing yourself into becoming indispensable, which I guess every place I've been, I've been fortunate enough to learn a lot of different things and, continue to change my mentality and thought process and realize that I don't have everything figured out, but I'll spend as much time as needed to learn what I need to be quote unquote indispensable. Mm-hmm. So it goes down to, just the practitioner themselves, looking at how they think, how they act. Are they open to being evaluated? Do they even know how they're perceived? And then understanding that, hey, sports nutrition is a very wide and all-encompassing field. You're not going to know everything about everything, but you should have a basic fundamental understanding of all these key components. And then if there's an area you don't know about, information's out there for free. Like you said, all you got to do is, there's probably a free podcast out there. There's research that's been published that you can more than likely get for free, whether through listservs or if you're part of a university, all that's free. Or you can reach out to researchers or higher level practitioners that you feel have a wide variety of knowledge, and obviously lead with value. Don't ask them, be like, hey, tell me what to do. It's like, hey, hopefully we can talk. I can provide you with this. That way you don't feel like you're just giving up 30 minutes or an hour of your time for free. So there's tons of things that people can do, because a lot of this stuff, like I got tasked all these things when I got here I'd never done before. So the first year I was in charge of blood biomarkers, I thought that the panel should look like this, as opposed to now what it looks like now working with Quest. It's completely different because I made the decision, say, since I'm in charge of this, it can be really helpful with what I do with the athletes. It can strengthen my resolve with recommendations for nutrition and recovery and sleep, that I really need to know what I'm talking about because I can be really effective with it. So I went out and started reading books. I started researching, talking to docs, talking to researchers. So I basically found that knowledge myself, and I didn't have to pay a dime outside of, buying 4 or 5 books from Amazon, which, that's not a lot of money given what I've gotten back from it. So I think, there's a lot that can be done. There's no one quick fix. You can say the same thing about S&C in almost every field, coaching too.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. I want to take a different angle real quick. You fix something as a strength coach, the kid feels better, they're moving better, they're bought in. How do you create the buy-in with sport nutrition? Because just like you said, you could take vitamin D and you're not going to feel it. You could take omega-3s, you're not going to feel anything. Like, how do you think you've created the buy-in at the pro level and at the college level? And which one do you think is harder to get a buy-in from?
That's a good question. I think it's harder at the pro level.
Okay.
Because you're talking about guys that are, some are my age, some are older. Now we've got a young team, so pretty much all of them are younger. But, we've had, very good players in the past that are older than me. They have millions and millions of dollars in the bank. They've had massive amount of success and won the best games, the biggest games on the national stage twice without any of my help. So who am I to come in and tell them, oh, you're doing this wrong? Obviously there's always something everybody can improve upon, myself too, when it comes to performance and health. If we're in the dining room and I see, this guy's got a plate of macaroni, he ain't got nothing else, I can't run up to him and be like, no, stop, grab it and throw it against the wall. Even though that's exactly what I want to do. Yeah. Now, depending on who it is, I might be able to get away with it, but it's more of just being around the guys, showing them what you're talking about, because they expect you to be really smart, and they're going to have questions, and once they ask their questions, they're going to want an answer. And I've had good conversations with a lot of vets, some that have ended up retiring, that have been around a few different places, and we've had some pretty intellectual conversations, and it's pretty surprising some of the stuff that comes out of their mouth that they've researched themselves, which I think is impressive. I think at the pro level, it's just getting to know them, getting to know what they like, being around them. I think when they're around you and they're comfortable, and you find those ins, whether it's with an influential player who's easy to get along with, who can kind of bring other guys in his position group or unit along with him to say, hey, how come you guys aren't doing this? And calling them out. Or utilizing somebody else in the organization, staff member, whether it's a trainer, whether it's another strength coach that happens to have a good relationship with that player. Just trying to use them as a soundboard for your message. Or even, the head coach or position coach or coordinator. Now, at the college level, I guess it's definitely a lot different because you have these kids for 3 to 5 years, almost guaranteed. So they don't know any different. They don't have a guru. They haven't worked with any other strength coach or any other dietitian. So you kind of have that trust automatically built in, but really it's yours to lose. So if you can't understand what they're going through, because the schedule of a college athlete is pretty rigorous.
Yeah, I find it very hard at the collegiate level to get kids to not buy in, but for the kids to provide themselves with the resources of, things that we're telling them, especially when they ask about, like certain foods with, certain vitamins and minerals in them. It's like, hey, the calf might not have, avocado. The calf might not have bison meat, so.
Yeah, grass-fed, or free-range eggs or organic chicken.
Yeah, and I'm always talking, and I do a poor job. I'm an asshole because I tell my kids, hey, I'm eating these fucking, $7 grass-fed, pasture-raised eggs, and they're like, Coach, we don't got those in the calf. And I'm like, yeah, maybe seven of those eggs equals, 2 of these eggs. I don't know what the nutritional value is, but but I find it hard. But I'm not an RD, so I don't know how to, do your job, with the expense of, the information that I have, at the infant level of being a quote unquote nutrition coach as well. But so Teek, how long have you been an RD for? About close to a decade now?
Close to 11 years now.
Close to 11 years. So, okay, you got a decade in the book. Where do you envision your career going? From a registered dietitian, at the high collegiate level, professional level, what's the next step for you? And what's the next step, do you think, for registered dietitians who are in the same position as you?
That's a good question. And I've actually been thinking about this a lot. Obviously, we've had so much transition here I've been ready. I've had my bags packed at the end of every year and never take anything for granted, and realize that, I'm as culpable as anybody else for our success and our failures.
Yeah. Hey, real quick. And if you can also tie in, what's the job security like for RDs? Because I don't think anyone ever talks about that.
No, that's actually a very great question. At the professional level, it's not as secure as at the collegiate level. At the collegiate level,
okay.
I mean, obviously, not every RD is going to be perfect, and the same thing goes with every career field that spans the globe, whether you're a doctor, teacher, strength coach, trainer, RD. The job security is definitely pretty good. I would say, from what I've experienced, on par at the university level as with athletic medicine staff members.
Okay.
I mean, as you know, strength coaches at the university level, it's, if the head coach goes, then you can pretty much,
you're tied in with them. Yeah, you pretty much.
Yeah, you're tied in with them. But a lot of places are trying to not do that for a variety of reasons, and I see the benefits and negatives of both sides. So I don't think there's one all-encompassing answer to it. At the pro level, there is some security depending on where you're packaged. Now, if you're packaged under the medical staff or under the GM or under, your pro personnel scouting department, which some people are, or under your operations people, I mean, you're not necessarily tied to the head coach that way. So if you're good at what you do, you're going to have some longevity, especially if you're able to grow every year and continue to progress your thought process and mentality. There have been some that have been let go with coaching changes. There have been some let go that have had some longevity, but again, it's definitely more secure than strength coaching, I think. Although I can't say that because I am a strength coach as well. So I kind of, like I said, I have my bags packed at the end of every year, knowing that, if I don't get brought back, then I'm on to the next challenge. And as you asked me, what do I see myself doing? To be honest, I mean, this is the highest level a dietitian can really achieve. Mm-hmm. Being on a coaching staff, having autonomy, having the opportunity to be here for 4 years. I think for me, reflecting on what's happened since quarantine and thinking about this a lot. And I know the appeal of everybody wanting to be in the NFL. There's a lot of RDs out there that have had some success at the college level that want to be in the NFL. I was like that too, because it's polarizing. Yeah, it's the Shield. It's the best professional league in the world.
Yeah, who doesn't want to work in the NFL and take a shot at winning a Super Bowl? Working with those athletes, those freaks, man.
And I think I've learned a lot since I've been in the NFL. I thought I knew, and I'm learning stuff like day by day, year by year. I'm starting a PhD here pretty soon. I'm in the works of working it out with USQ, University of South Queensland. I actually got to follow up with them.
What's like your focus going to be in?
So that's looking at kin anthropometric characteristics of American football.
Okay.
So it's never been done in American football, and I think it's going to be really useful. Just looking at the player top to bottom, trying to figure out how do we stratify, muscle, bone, fat, skin, residual mass by position group, and then correlating it with performance measures and markers. So we actually have a better idea of, once we get these kids at 18 years old, 17, 18, what is their growth potential and where should we get them, instead of the old mantra, the college head strength coach and college head coach is like, everybody has to be, bigger, stronger, faster. Everybody's got to be 20 pounds heavier. I'm like, well, you based on genetics and frame and body size, not every kid should be that, especially by position group. I mean, not every receiver needs to be 6'2", 205, 215. Sometimes you're going to get a 6'3", 6'4 guy with a tiny frame who's going to be 195. But what can you do to maximize?
Scary, 6'4", 195.
Hey, it sounds like a basketball player, but they're all,
I'm about to say Terrell Owens like 6'4", 230, Yeah,
he's a specimen, though. We know he's a freak.
He's a freak, man.
Yeah, so for me, I think just because I've had my hand in all these different things, and for me, it's more about the communication, the dialogue, helping other people get better, not only the athletes, but all the other staff groups. And I think I said this on a webinar previously, you learn more from the positions, the failures, the people around you that aren't maximizing their ability, or you feel that could do their job better than you do from the people that you would consider like really high mentors. Because the mentors you're going to try to emulate too much, but the people that, if you've had a bad boss or if you worked with colleagues that are just not good, and you know why they're not good, and it motivates you to want to not be like that and want to be better. And if you get in a leadership position, you would hold people accountable to not let that happen. I think that's hugely valuable. And that's kind of happened quite a bit previously in my career, where I've learned a lot from those types of situations and stimulated me to want to be a leader, want to be even better. I think having my hand at being a performance director or, an AD at a university, I think would be huge, especially when we're talking about the way performance staffs are built and developed, and they're all over the place. I think most places aren't really doing it right for a variety of reasons. And at the college level, you have ADs that oversee strength and conditioning, nutrition, performance, and medical that have no background in any of that. So how do you develop your staff into getting them better if you have no idea about the background of the fields? But again, you don't necessarily have to be all knowledgeable in those situations. You just have to know how to understand how to lead and guide people and stimulate and build them up. The same way you have people are getting hired as performance directors that have a background in data analysis, or a physical therapist is now a performance director, or Matt Patricia was a rocket scientist and he became a DC and now he's a head coach, Yeah. I think sometimes we fall into those traps saying, oh, this guy's never coached football before. I mean, in terms of strength conditioning, how can he be a strength coach for football? It's like, well, if you know the basics, if you know physiology, if you have a brain and you know how to communicate with athletes and figure it out, you don't need to. The same way I actually just got hit up by a university. They're looking for a dietitian for their football team, a head dietitian, and then they're going to get an assistant, but they want that person to have worked football previously. I'm like, well, I understand the thought process, but you might be missing out on somebody who has a totally different thought process that could be really good, that might come from abroad or come from a different sport that can add more to what's happening instead of just always staying in this lane of one sport.
Yeah, I got to agree with you, because I was actually talking to somebody about it last week. Like, you're better off being not a specialist in a certain sport, but just principle driven, because the principles work across every sport,
Yeah.
Like, especially with like strength and conditioning, for example, like your principle of specificity, your overload principles, those all, they are what they are. And you could be a soccer strength coach, and you could take that same body of work and take it with a football program and have success. Just obviously know the intensities and audience you're working with, and just tweak a few things as you go along, like you said. No,
I agree. In the same way that I when I was at K-State, took my first job at Michigan State, I'd never been exposed to an athletic department like that. But learned a lot in those 3 years, and then fortunate enough to get the job at Oregon, where I had never run a department. I had never hired anybody. I never fired anybody. I never had to come up with protocols and policies for all these different sports. I never had to run a budget. I never had to come up with sponsorship deals and increase allocations and deal with ADs and donors and things of that nature. But I was able to figure it out because my mindset was like, all right, talk to everybody, learn as much as you can. You might F up here and there, but all you got to do is learn from it. As long as it isn't a big, huge mistake, then that'll be a positive. And the same thing, I had never worked in the NFL before. And it really is a totally different game in terms of dealing with these attitudes and speaking to players than it is college, because the college kids will do any and everything you tell them to do. They don't have a choice and they don't know any differently. Yeah. The NFL is a player-driven league. If you tell these guys to do something, they look at you and they say, "Ha, F off."
I mean, those guys got the money to kind of, seek outside, support or whatever the word is,
Yeah, and there was a post about LeBron's trainer had mentioned something about his post-game recovery methodology in terms of like what he likes to drink, and
I think I know what you're talking about. I think I heard of this.
Yeah, so it was a long interview. Long story short, there was a group of RDs, interns, dietitians, that were so appalled by what he said. They were like calling this guy out on social media saying, "Oh, LeBron, you can do so much better if you have an RD. You should hire an RD yourself. This, and this." And I'm like, this guy's been with LeBron for 16 years. So every piece of success LeBron's had, that guy's been right there with him. LeBron's been the best basketball player for 16 years on the planet. 3 championships, 9 total. It was 8 in a row, something crazy like that. It's like, I'm sure he's doing a lot of other stuff in the background that nobody really hears about just because you didn't like the initial answer. And let's face it, he's got a lot of sponsorships. So that probably plays a heavy role with what he's telling people he's doing. even though athletes might not be doing that. They might just be saying it just to appease their sponsors and then doing something completely different, because that happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
But then again, LeBron trusts this guy. So this guy could tell LeBron to eat, grass shavings, and it's going to help him improve his, VO2 max by 25%, which equates to, one made extra shot per game. And he's not going to care, because it's all about the trust.
Yeah.
Because he knows LeBron, he knows what he likes and what he doesn't like. I mean, it's just stuff like that just drives me crazy. People just start pointing the finger and jumping on a bandwagon without realizing, like, hey, this is real life. This is how athletes think, and you have to develop this relationship first, and then you get them to do what you want them to do.
Yeah. And it drives me crazy too when people start talking about, shit that like all these all-time greats, like hey, Tom Brady's on like a vegan-based diet. LeBron James is doing this, and my thing is like, man, those guys are freaks. Like Michael Jordan smoked cigars before games, and he still lit it up. So like, the freaks, leave them alone, man. It's the in-betweeners we got to focus on a bit, man. But Pratik, I got to ask you my main question, my wild card, my curveball, whatever you want to call it, man. If you were not a sports dietitian today, if you were not involved with, strength and conditioning and nutrition today, what other job or career do you see yourself doing in life?
I'd be a teacher.
A teacher?
At university level.
Everyone want to be a teacher.
I mean, it's funny because I've done it before. So I was a grad teacher at K-State.
That's right. Yeah, you were.
I taught at Michigan State. I taught at Oregon. And I love it. Like, if there's a way to get my same salary doing that, I think, you get a chance to touch so many different kids at an impressionable age. And you and I both went through it. I mean, undergrad and grad school, we know the positives and negatives of the education system in America. And right now it really isn't good enough.
It's not good.
And that's why I'm going back to be a PhD. I reach out to different programs, especially K-State, since I went there twice as my alma mater, and they're starting a sports nutrition minor. And so I'm like, hey, if you want to pick my brain, if you want my honest thoughts, I will give you as much time as you can handle and do as many, Zoom classes, collaborations, what have you. But I think there's so much that kids can learn in school that they're not taught, that you have to learn outside, that if I would have known this stuff 5, 10, 15 years ago, my life would be a lot better. And I think it's just a lot about just very, very individualized things, like the way people act, learning about business, how to develop financial security and independence, being a professional, situational stuff that happens. We're all taught all the theory in school, but we're never really taught anything about applying it. I know a lot of people are trying to work on that, but I think that there's a huge missed opportunity to teach, life skills 101, which every incoming freshman should be able to take, whether they're on campus or do it by distance. I think it'd be so valuable, because I had a really great sociology teacher in high school who did just that. And it's the one class that every single person that went through Northwest that took it remembers. And I remember almost everything about it. I remember his name. I remember who was in the class. I remember the topics we talked about. And it was awesome. And I thought, if college is like this, I'm going to be in college forever, which unfortunately it didn't end up being like that. But I think, everybody always wants change, but nobody wants to do anything about it. I think that's an opportunity to do just that. But other than that, it's tough. I mean, I like impacting people's lives positively, using the knowledge that I've been able to accumulate and experiences that I have in nutrition, exercise, health, and fitness. So maybe work with a bunch of different companies on, whether it's wellness, helping their employees develop better habits, helping them lower insurance costs, increase productivity, which, it costs these large companies millions and billions of dollars every year.
Yeah.
We're helping them just understand higher level thinking, communication, some of the stuff that Brett does and talks about. I've lived through all of it for the past 11 years. I could write a book about my experiences and then in terms of that and a lot of other topics. And everybody also needs a side hustle. So doing some stuff with real estate, rentals, stuff like that. But I would say, I know it's probably the same answer you get from a lot of people, a teacher at university level.
There you go. Most people said teacher. nobody really expressed where, but the university level. It's funny. I was an adjunct, and I don't talk about this much. I was an adjunct professor for exercise science at Fairleigh Dickinson for 2 years. I kind of liked it, kind of didn't like it. I liked it because I was able to, get in front of a group of young people and teach them about, something that I'm so passionate about. But at the same time, 90% of the kids in that class, didn't give a damn about what I was trying to teach. It was just an elective course for them. So, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Well, it wasn't a science school anyway. It was just, more of a business aspect for sports admin, but that was a class they had to take. But I enjoyed it and didn't enjoy it for, that one particular reason, but it is what it is.
No, I know what you mean. And, maybe you stimulated somebody to learn more about it. You never know.
Hopefully. I don't know. I mean, I really don't know, but hopefully I impacted somebody's life to want to, exercise a little bit differently if that would make any sense to them. But hey, Pratik, man, I appreciate you coming on today, man. This was some real great information, valuable, stuff I could take away from you, stuff hopefully our listeners could take away from you, just, from talking about sports nutrition, being a sports dietitian from a different angle versus talking about carbs and protein and fats all the damn time,
No, thanks for having me on, and definitely glad to get a chance to share some information with your listeners.
Hey, Pratik, so if any of our listeners want to get in contact with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, I'm pretty active on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. So feel free to message me there. My Instagram and Twitter accounts are the same. It's at Pratik X Patel. And I believe my LinkedIn is the same too.
There you go, folks. All right, Pratik, appreciate you coming on, brother.
No problem. Thanks for having me.